Darius III, the last king of the mighty Achaemenid Empire, was born Artashata. His life began far from the halls of power. He was not born a prince, but his lineage could be traced back to Darius II, connecting him to the royal bloodline. We know little of his early years. History's spotlight focuses brightly on his later reign, overshadowed by the looming figure of Alexander the Great. Yet, those early years undoubtedly shaped the man who would face the Macedonian king. What we do know paints a picture of a man who understood duty. Before ascending to the throne, Darius served as a satrap, a governor within the vast Persian Empire. This role would have given him invaluable experience in administration and military matters, skills he would later need as king. However, fate had a dramatic turn in store for the future Darius III. He was destined not to live a life of quiet governorship. The Persian Empire, at its zenith, was about to face its greatest challenge, and Darius would be at the heart of the storm. The year was 336 BC. The Persian Empire, vast and sprawling, found itself on the precipice of chaos. King Artaxerxes III, Darius's distant relative, lay dead, poisoned by his vizier, the ambitious Bagoas. Bagoas, hungry for power, placed Arses, one of the king's sons, on the throne, hoping to rule through him. However, Bagoas's schemes proved short-lived. Arses, unhappy as a puppet king, attempted to assert his own authority. Bagoas, ruthless and cunning, countered by having Arses assassinated. With the line of succession in disarray, the throne lay vacant. It was in this moment of crisis that Darius, then a satrap, emerged as a contender. Sources suggest he may have been related to Bagoas, but the exact nature of their connection remains unclear. Nonetheless, Bagoas, perhaps seeing in Darius a more pliable ruler, supported his claim to the throne. Thus, Darius, who had lived in the shadow of royalty, found himself crowned Darius III, Shahanshah, King of Kings, ruler of the vast Persian Empire. Little did he know that his reign would be dominated by the relentless advance of a young Macedonian king named Alexander. Darius III inherited an empire that, despite its immense size and wealth, was riddled with internal tensions. Revolts and unrest, simmering beneath the surface, threatened to erupt. The new king, facing these challenges head-on, moved quickly to consolidate his power and bring stability to his realm. He moved decisively against Bagoas, the kingmaker who had orchestrated his rise. Recognizing the threat posed by the ambitious vizier, Darius outsmarted Bagoas, forcing him to drink the same poison he had used on Artaxerxes III. With Bagoas removed, Darius asserted his authority and took firm control of his court. In these early days of his reign, Darius proved himself a capable administrator. He reformed the tax system, aiming to make it fairer and more efficient. He invested in infrastructure, repairing roads and canals to improve trade and communication throughout his vast empire. He also sought to bolster the empire's defences, strengthening garrisons and raising new levies. However, the challenges facing Darius were immense. The empire, vast and unwieldy, was difficult to govern. Ancient rivalries and resentments festered among the different satrapies. Unbeknownst to Darius, a storm was brewing in the west, a storm embodied in the form of a young, ambitious king named Alexander of Macedon. Across the Aegean Sea, a new power was rising, Macedon. Under the leadership of Philip II, Macedon had transformed itself from a backwater kingdom into a formidable military force. Philip, a shrewd strategist and ruthless leader, had his sights set on expanding his power eastward. In 336 BC, Philip sent an advance force into Asia Minor, the western edge of the Persian Empire. This incursion, led by Parmenion, one of Philip's most trusted generals, was intended to test Persian defences and establish a foothold for further expansion. However, fate intervened. Philip was assassinated, leaving his son Alexander to inherit his throne and ambitions. Alexander, just 20 years old at the time, was already a seasoned military commander, having proven his mettle in battle alongside his father. Darius, preoccupied with internal challenges and perhaps underestimating the young Macedonian king, initially saw Alexander as a minor threat. He believed that the Persian satraps in Asia Minor would be more than capable of dealing with the Macedonians. This miscalculation would prove to be a fatal error. In 334 BC, Alexander, at the head of a well-trained Macedonian army, crossed the Hellespont, now known as the Dardanelles, into Asia Minor. His army, though smaller than the Persian forces arrayed against him, was highly disciplined and motivated. Alexander, driven by ambition and a thirst for glory, was determined to conquer the Persian Empire. The first major clash between the Macedonians and Persians took place at the Granicus River in May of 334 BC. The Persian satraps of Asia Minor, confident in their numerical superiority, had assembled a large army, including a contingent of Greek mercenaries renowned for their fighting prowess. Darius, still focused on consolidating his power in the heart of the empire, did not personally lead the Persian army at Granicus. Instead, he entrusted the defense of Asia Minor to his satraps, believing them capable of repelling the Macedonian invaders. The Battle of Granicus was a resounding victory for Alexander. The Macedonian king, displaying his characteristic bravery and tactical brilliance, led a cavalry charge that shattered the Persian lines. The Persian satraps, their army routed, were either killed or captured. The news of the defeat at Granicus shook Darius III. Alexander's victory, once dismissed as a minor setback, now posed a serious threat to the Persian Empire. Darius, recognizing the gravity of the situation, resolved to personally lead his army against the Macedonian invaders. Darius assembled a massive army, drawing troops from all corners of his empire. His forces, vastly outnumbering Alexander's, included skilled cavalry units, fearsome chariots, and a contingent of elite infantry known as the Immortals. In November 333 BC, the two armies met at Issus, a narrow plain near the Mediterranean coast. The Battle of Issus was a fiercely contested engagement. Darius, personally leading his troops from his chariot, fought with courage and determination. However, Alexander's tactical genius again proved decisive. The Macedonian king, exploiting the terrain and the weaknesses in the Persian lines, launched a series of devastating attacks that shattered Darius's army. The Persian king, fearing capture, fled the battlefield, leaving behind his family and his royal treasury. The defeat at Issus was a crushing blow to Darius and the Persian Empire. Alexander, emboldened by his victory, continued his relentless advance eastward, conquering key cities and securing vital supply lines. Darius, desperate to stop the Macedonian advance, gathered a new army even larger than the one he had fielded at Issus. In 331 BC, the two armies met at Gaugamela, near modern-day Mosul in Iraq. The Battle of Gaugamela was one of the largest and bloodiest battles of the ancient world. Darius, having learned from his previous defeats, had chosen a flat, open battlefield that favored his chariots and superior numbers. Despite Darius's preparations, Alexander's strategic brilliance and the discipline of the Macedonian army again carried the day. The Macedonian king, leading a daring cavalry charge, broke through the Persian lines and threatened Darius himself. The Persian king, once more fearing capture, fled the field. The Battle of Gaugamela marked the end of the Achaemenid Empire's ability to offer organized resistance to Alexander. Darius, having lost his army and his treasury, fled eastwards, hoping to raise a new force. However, his time as ruler was running out. After Gaugamela, Darius III, once the mighty king of kings, found himself a fugitive in his own empire. He fled eastward, seeking refuge in the eastern satrapies, desperately hoping to raise a new army to confront Alexander. However, his former power had evaporated. Betrayal followed betrayal. Bessus, a Bactrian satrap and one of Darius's own kinsmen, seized the fleeing king, holding him captive. Bessus, hoping to use Darius as a bargaining chip with Alexander, or perhaps even seize the throne for himself, continued to retreat eastward with the captive king. Alexander, relentless in his pursuit, closed in on Darius and Bessus. Seeing Alexander's advance, Bessus and his co-conspirators, fearing Alexander's wrath, decided to eliminate Darius. They stabbed their king and left him to die in his cart. Alexander, finding Darius on the verge of death, was deeply moved. He covered Darius's body with his own cloak as a sign of respect for his fallen enemy. The death of Darius III in July 330 BC marked the end of the Achaemenid dynasty and the beginning of Alexander's reign as the new master of Persia. Darius III's reign, though brief and ultimately tragic, should not be defined solely by his defeats against Alexander the Great. He inherited an empire riddled with internal strife and faced an enemy unlike any the Persians had encountered before. Despite his ultimate failure, Darius demonstrated courage, administrative skill, and a deep sense of duty to his empire. He attempted to reform the empire's administration, streamline its finances, and bolster its defenses. He led his armies with bravery, even in the face of overwhelming odds. Ultimately, he was a king who faced extraordinary challenges with dignity and determination. History, often written by the victors, has not been kind to Darius III. He is often portrayed as a weak and indecisive ruler, overshadowed by the brilliance of Alexander the Great. However, a closer look at his reign reveals a more nuanced and tragic figure, a king who fought valiantly to defend his empire against insurmountable odds.